Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast live here on Friday, the 14th. Happy Valentine's Day to all of you out there if you're watching with us today live, or if you're watching in the near future. I hope you had a wonderful Valentine's Day. I'm JT Runke, writer and reporter here with the 440 Sports Podcast Network. You can follow me on Twitter at JT_Runke. And once again, joining me after a little bit of a hiatus on Tuesday is none other than my co-host, Stoney, Keeley, editor-in-chief of Sobros Network and co-writer over at Stacking the Inbox. Stoney, how are you doing today, my friend, on a Hot Read Happy Hour Friday? And do you have any interesting Valentine's plans planned for today?
As a matter of fact, well, first of all, I hate that I missed the conversation with Sean McAvoy because I really wanted to get into the weeds on some of the questions that I had submitted for the show. And I watched the episode back. It was a great episode, but I kept thinking to myself, like, I could go like 4 hours on a show with him, just picking his brain and talking about this draft class. So hell of a job by you guys on Tuesday. That show was awesome. I've gotten my ass kicked this week, but we don't have to go into it because it is Hot Read Happy Hour. We're feeling good. I got a little bit of that go-go juice going, so we're getting the weekend started earlier. Valentine's Day, I'm actually going to recreate one of the first Valentine's Day dates that my wife and I ever went on. Like 11 years ago, we just went to PF Chang's and then went to a movie. So I got reservations at PF Chang's for tonight. And for those that do not know, yes, you can make reservations at PF Chang's, and it rules because you walk into the building and you're just like, yes, I have reservations for 2 at 7:30. And then everybody else that is waiting for a table starts looking at each other like, what the fuck, man? Your reservations at PF Chang's? Who is this hardo? And I just wave at him as I walk on by to my table that's ready for me.
Hey, we love it. A Hot Read Happy Hour Friday here, smiling and waving at the haters as we walk in for our 7:30 reservations at PF Chang's. Nothing could be better than that. If you are watching with us live on Twitter or Facebook, do us a favor and head on over to the 440 Sports YouTube channel chat, where you can join people like D Good and Eddie, who says that he did not know that you could do that at a PF Chang. Wild, but it is indeed. And if you are watching with us and you needed a reminder that it is in fact Valentine's Day, don't worry, we have you covered because we are sponsored by the wonderful ML Rose Craft Beer and Burgers. If you need a place to go last minute, don't worry, they have you covered because they simply have an incredible menu. 25 beers on tap, 7 locations, a great craft burger menu as well, and Sinker's Beverages. If you need, if you're doing a little stay-in date or something like that and forgot the rosé, forgot the wine, forgot whatever you needed tonight, they got you covered. Go on over to Sinker's Beverages and pick yourself something up for tonight with that special one. D Good saying Stoney would be that guy to get a rezo at PF Chang's. I love it. Hey, you got to make sure, like, if you're going to recreate something, you can't have any variables in the way.
Listen,
and I love it. So
that's one thing you guys got to know about me. I'm gonna be OCD about getting a table for my wife on Valentine's Day. I'm gonna make sure if I could make reservations at like McDonald's, then I would do that just to make sure that my wife and I have a table for date night.
I love it. And with it being Valentine's Day today and a Hot Read Happy Hour Friday, I thought we might, do something a little special today. There's been so much talk about quarterback at this position. This has become a little bit of quarterback week for the Hot Read podcast as we start to dive in to that position, a position that the Titans desperately need an answer to. And I figured, what better way to talk about the options that the Titans could pursue in the 2025 offseason than to play a little bit of a matchmaker game, swiping left and swiping right on these quarterback options, as you put it on Twitter, maybe not as family friendly, smashing or passing on some of these quarterbacks as well. It is an interesting conversation because, as I said in my tweet before the show, I think my opinions on a lot of these guys are going to be very different than Titans consensus, or at least Titans fans consensus. And frankly, I'm just going to say my opinion, and it's my show, and I get to say my opinion. And
There you
you guys
go. That's,
just gonna have to deal with it. And what those opinions may be, you're going to have to stick and find out today. Before we dive into that, I think my philosophy on the quarterback position right now for the Titans is that regardless of who they get, this team is nowhere near just a quarterback away, in my opinion. We talked about this
yeah.
on last Friday's show, kind of our wish list for the Tennessee Titans offseason, talking about how many holes each of us respectively believe this team has. I was of the opinion that there are more holes to fill still than maybe you would be or other people would be. That being said, I don't think that this team is necessarily a quarterback away. And now there are people that push back on that, like a Daniel Jeremiah who tweeted out earlier this week saying, I hear a lot of people saying our team is so far away from winning. Then I look back at teams like Washington and teams like the Chargers picking second and fifth in last year's draft, both playoff teams 1 year later, and Washington was 1 win away from the Super Bowl. It can turn around fast. You can look at teams like the Texans and how fast they
boy.
turned it around and whatnot. However,
Mm.
I am looking at these quarterbacks today from the perspective that anyone on this list is not the piece that's going to get them back to contention. I still think that when you look at where they are now versus where they would play with the Titans, they would be going to, at least in the case of some of these guys, a situation where it was worse than where they were beforehand. Does that make sense, Stoney? Do you agree with that? Do you think that a quarterback could make this team playoff viable and it would just take that? Or are you along the same thought process as I am?
Well, I think so. I do think that elevated quarterback play makes this team more competitive. I'm not really sure by how much, but I think if you look at last year, the number of games that the Titans were competitive in, if they just had better quarterback play, they probably win a few more games. So I do think, yeah, I'm not sure what the vast impact of it would be, but I do think that the team would be better with a better quarterback. But I also think that there are other dire needs besides quarterback, like edge rusher, like right tackle, things that you have to get. You have to add some speed in the receiving core, some depth to the receiving core. You got to get younger at several spots. You've got to add depth at several spots. To bring up Washington as an example of, oh, you just go get the quarterback and you're fine, is completely dismissive of all of the moves that Washington made last offseason. It was not just, hey, let's go get Jaden Daniels and suddenly we're a win away from the Super Bowl. They had a hell of a draft. They had a hell of a free agency. They were smart. They had a calculated approach to it, and they got guys that had leadership qualities that kind of raised the performance of the defense. And then they go get Dan Quinn, a stabilizing factor at head coach. They get Cliff Kingsbury. There was a lot more that went into Washington's success this year than just going to get a quarterback. So I get the point that if you're better there, you've got a better chance to win. And that is the result of the quarterback position being the most important on the field and all that. But I think this team needs a lot more than quarterback, and it's not so simple for the Titans in the spot that they're at, where they're just going to go get a quarterback, and all of a sudden we're talking about a Washington-esque run to a conference championship.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. Eddie saying in the comments, does healthy Tua make this a playoff team? No. Frankly, I
I
don't
don't
think it
know.
does because, once again, half of your line is not there or viable. And we've seen what a healthy Tua can do and what happens quickly if Tua does not become healthy. So,
Yeah.
first of all, I would, does healthy Tua make this a playoff team? What's your offensive line look like is what I would respond to that. But I agree with you there that this team definitely needs a lot more than just a fix at the quarterback position. And specifically in this draft, which Daniel Jeremiah also went on to say about this draft in particular, saying when discussing this year's quarterback class, the word fit has never been more important. I don't see any of them as universal talents, perfect for any scheme, supporting cast, weather, etc. Like, you can't really say that, the Commanders, who fell into what was pretty much a universal generational prospect, like a Jaden
Yeah.
Daniels there, versus a Cam Ward or Shadur Sanders conversation, I think is also very different. But with that being said, it doesn't necessarily mean that the Titans have to go with quarterback. I think even though it is quarterback week, I think the discussion of the Titans don't necessarily have to go with quarterback in this class if they aren't feeling so inclined is still very much on the table. They still very much could go with a bridge guy to get them to 7, 8, 9 wins and keep this thing afloat until a better quarterback class arises where they can then go all in on a guy they really love. And with that being said, like, you don't have to go with the quarterback. You can go with the quarterback and still go get one of these bridge guys. It's not a 1-to-1 here, but how we're going to do it today is I've laid out, I want to say 13-ish options. I'm not going to go back here for bad radio and go back through all the options I've laid out, but 13-ish, double-digit-ish scenarios here. And we're going to play, well, for me, I'm going to swipe left or swipe right, which if you are part of a older generation, that is a Tinder reference where if you swipe left, you are not interested. Swipe right, you are interested. Or
I better write that down.
For Stoney, just so honestly, 11 years, your first date. I don't know if Tinder was probably around back then.
It was not back.
It was not 11 years
no,
ago.
I met my wife the old-fashioned way at a restaurant at dinner with mutual friends.
Nice. Well,
yeah.
Yes. So on Tinder, if you swipe left, you want to pass on that person, and if you swipe right for your criteria here, you want to smash that person, or in this case, that quarterback. And so that's how we're going to do it today. And we have to start with the most intriguing one that is not necessarily on the open market right now, but is probably the one that could fix things the most instantly. And that is the Rams quarterback, Matthew Stafford. Obviously, we heard earlier this offseason already that he does intend on coming back to play. Whether that is with the Los Angeles Rams or a different team is still to be determined, because he is under contract with the Rams, but there is no more guaranteed money on that contract, most likely meaning he wants a new contract. Whether he is traded to a different team or not is still yet to be determined, but obviously, if the Titans wanted to go get Matthew Stafford, they would have to trade for him. Now, Stoney, I'm gonna kind of toss this one up to you first. It depends on the price, I think, ultimately. But if we take that out of the equation right now, gut feeling, I think we both would agree that Matthew Stafford is a smash for both of us. If you could get your hands on a Matthew Stafford, I think you go ahead and do so. I think that's without question. Even though he's 37, yes, he is 37. You probably are only going to have 1 to 2 years out of him, and he still is a top 5 passer even at that age. I think you still go get him. It all comes down to a matter of price. And so my question to you is that if you're looking at Matthew Stafford within the lens of, say, I would say capital around the range, doesn't necessarily have to be this, but adding up to where maybe the evaluation of the 35th pick in this draft. Are you swiping left on a Matthew Stafford, or are you swiping right? Are you passing on him at that price point, or are you still doing it? Are you biting the bullet?
Oh man. See, what makes this a complicated issue is that you know that as soon as you acquire Matthew Stafford, you flip the hourglass and the sand is falling through the glass. But I think, oh man, I don't even want to say this, but if elevated quarterback play makes this a more competitive team, could they continue building around Stafford enough to actually be competitive in 2025? Like, if you think so, then maybe you do part with that draft capital and you go get the guy, and then you still have the first overall pick. You can take Abdul Carter, and then you get your right tackle with like one of these day 3 guys that's probably still going to be an upgrade over what you have. It's risky, but and I think it does kind of signal maybe we think we're closer to competing than the national consensus, and I'm not sure that they're there yet, but I think if man, I would be so tempted. Like, you don't give me the remote in that case, because I'm definitely gonna hit. Don't give me the phone in that case, because I'm probably gonna swipe right.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But I know
I
in the back of my mind, I'm like, don't give me the phone. Don't let me make this decision, because I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, and that's where I think I probably disagree with a lot of people on this. I love Matthew Stafford. I think he's elite. If that you can take that, if Zach Lyons is listening out there, I think Matthew Stafford deserves to be in elite discussions at
I'm
some
with
point
you.
in his career.
I'm
However,
with you.
like I said, he's 37. You're probably going to have to pay him a new contract around the range of, and like floor Baker Mayfield is the
Yeah.
floor. 33 million. I feel like you're not getting Stafford for anything less than that. You're probably going all the way up to what his former contract was, which is 40. That's basically almost half to 2/3 of your cap space right now. Obviously, you can kick that down the road, but that they're just ballparking, just looking at it in a vacuum, right? You're paying that for a top 5 passer. Probably makes this offense continue to move in a positive direction. But like I said, this team is nowhere near ready to support a quarterback like Stafford. And if it's really going to take the price point of a second round pick or the evaluation close to that, it's not worth it, in my opinion, to go get Matthew Stafford. It really doesn't make sense when you look at what Matthew Stafford is doing. You can say, well, look at what Matthew Stafford's doing with a middling Los Angeles Rams team. And I'd argue that that Rams team is in such a better position than what the Titans have. When you look at their wide receiver core, when you look at their offensive line, who, by the way, is still pretty young and looks decent. You look at that defense, like they have so much more in place with Matthew Stafford there that they have had in place with Matthew Stafford than the Titans have at all. And I think that if you're going to go out and pay that price, like you said, not only does it tip the hourglass and start the clock on a guy like Matthew Stafford for the rest of his career, but it also starts the clock on a guy like Mike Borgonzi and this draft and what they're going to do, right? I don't think that
Yeah.
even if you take a Matthew Stafford, this team is getting to NFC or AFC championship level contention within the 2 years you have Matthew Stafford. They just aren't ready. This is more of a 3-year track for this, at least Mike Borgonzi and his front office, than it is, maybe a 1 or 2 year turnaround.
Yeah, and I think, like, if there was a dream scenario where you could trade for Matthew Stafford and still draft a Cam Ward or Shador Sanders to kind of groom to become the heir apparent, like, yeah, you take Matthew Stafford for a couple of years and then you've got a guy theoretically ready to go, but I just don't see a scenario in which they can do both this year and still address all of the needs that they have. And so I kind of lean towards it's just going to be too hard to pull off and too costly to pull off when you're at this stage in your rebuild that you're in, because man, this roster it needs a lot of work. I mean, I do think they're in a better position this offseason than they were last offseason from a talent standpoint, but when you start digging into the contracts that they have, it's rough shape, man. Like, they're in a spot where they basically have to hit on every single acquisition they make this offseason if this team's going to be competitive. And I just don't think that's realistic to expect right now. So I think, even with like a 50% hit rate, it's probably going to take a couple more cycles before this team gets to where it wants to go, or at least establishes the foundation. And so I think for me, it's hard to see where a Matthew Stafford fits into that, when, a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers you look at and you think, okay, they make sense to trade for Matthew Stafford because that roster is ready made to go on a run. You get a guy like that at the helm, suddenly the Steelers look like a Super Bowl contender to me. So it makes sense for them to do it. They also don't have a whole lot of roster holes, but the Titans aren't in a position like that. And so I think ultimately with what the Rams will want for Stafford, I think it would be awfully hard to get a deal done that would be considered a real win for the Titans.
I agree with you here. And Eddie says you can't go get Stafford. Why would you waste capital on a win now move? You already did that with Snead. It's once again subscribing to that thought process of, wanting to go win now when Mike Borgonzi continues to say that they want as much draft capital as possible. It's hard to go trade away your second round pick and you're only in one of your 2 top 100 picks when you're talking about wanting 12 in the next 3 drafts. That means you would have to have 6 and 5 in the next 2. That's impossible. And so I think it's really tough here. The next one, which I think
I want to ask real quick. What if you just traded Snead for Stafford and the 2 win now moves cancel each other out?
We've had this conversation before. I think trading a L'Jarius Snead for a 37-year-old Matthew Stafford is pretty foolish, in my opinion. And I'd be interested to hear what people in the comment section say, because I think if you trade L'Jarius Snead for Matthew Stafford 1-for-1, you're replacing, and sure, I think in that scenario, that signals that you're going to go get a guy like Travis Hunter, and he becomes your next lockdown cornerback.
It's a good cornerback class this draft.
Good cornerback class, but at the same time, you're taking away a 29-year-old player who's still in his prime,
injury prone.
I mean, Matthew Stafford's also getting up there in age. I don't see why, if we're saying one guy could potentially still get injured down the road here because he's injury prone, the guy who's almost 10 years older than him, are we, who also has gone through injury. Less than a year ago, we were looking at Stetson Bennett and Wolford playing quarterback for the Rams in a season that was lost. I don't see how it's a 1-for-1. It makes sense to me. I'd be interested to see what other people in the chat say. Now, listen, if D Good brings this up, if the Titans were to maybe trade a guy like Will Levis to the Rams in that deal, maybe you get Stafford for Stafford and a 4th for Levis and something else. I could be into that as well.
Harold Landry.
Harold Landry, yeah. See how much old guys you could offload onto that team. But
yeah,
I'm pretty out on the idea that you can successfully continue this rebuild by going and acquiring a guy like Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, I want Matthew Stafford. Okay, let it be known. I'm smashing Matthew Stafford. You'll find throughout this episode, my inhibitions are low. I'm pretty open to everybody. There's not going to use the word I'm thinking because this is a family-friendly show for the most part. But I'm open to any and all comers at the quarterback position. But particularly with Stafford, because the Rams passing concepts are kind of similar to what Brian Callahan tried to run last year, I think he would be a good fit. I still think that he's got it if you can protect him. So if you shore up the offensive line and you get a Matthew Stafford, I think he could be a great addition to this Titans roster. But I just think they're in the infancy of this rebuild. And it's just not a move that you can afford to make right now because of the draft capital.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Eddie brings up that the Rams could potentially trade Stafford and go sign Darnold. I mean, certainly we'll get to Sam Darnold because I have thoughts about that as well. But we can move on to, I think, one of the easiest ones for us, right? We talked about this a couple of minutes ago, but if you have the right rookie quarterback, and it makes sense, and you think he fits the mold, you're taking him. And I think I'm okay with that. If this new staff with Mike Borgonzi Chad Brinker and Brian Callahan at the helm feel convicted enough to say, this is the guy we want to attach ourselves to, a Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders type. If they want to hitch their wagon and start the doomsday clock on their jobs with one of these guys, I'm okay with it. I'm swiping right on that idea. I'm okay with getting your guy when you have the first overall pick. It's not many times that you get that. Even if you were to have another bad season, it's never guaranteed, right? The Titans were never guaranteed to have the first overall pick until the Giants went and did Giants things towards the end of the season, right? And so with that, if you are convicted and feel good about one of these guys, you go out and get them. And I think that's pretty much the simplest way I can put it.
Could not have said it myself. Could not have said it better myself, JT. I'm right there with you. I like both of these guys under the assumption that there's patience with the coaching staff, there's stability, continuity. They are committed to the long term. And I don't know if we're there with the coaching staff. I don't know how the front office truly feels about Brian Callahan and company, but if we're keeping everybody together, if we're keeping the band together for this run, I'm okay with them going quarterback, either of these guys.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Now, the perfect scenario would be, to me, is trade back to, let's say, 3 or so if the Giants wanted to come up and get a guy like Cam Ward, and then you take Shedeur Sanders with that haul, which, by the way, the conversation about Shedeur Sanders I saw today on Titans Twitter was absolutely bonkers and outrageous. You people do not know what you're watching if you don't think that Shedeur Sanders cannot play at the NFL level.
It drives me nuts,
and
JT.
is not worth at least a first round pick. Now, I'm not saying that he's deserving of the first overall, because I don't think either of these quarterbacks are worth even a top 5 pick. But if you are saying that Shedeur Sanders should not even be in the first round, I need you to rethink a lot about your life and reassess personally.
The Shedeur Sanders discourse is going to make me become the Joker this week.
I agree with you. Now, we can get into that. I think as I continue to watch more tape, I thought that maybe I would cool on the idea of Shedeur Sanders and warm up to Cam Ward. I'm warming up to the idea of Cam Ward, but as I continue to watch both of them, I like Shedeur Sanders even more and more as a fit in this Titans offense, as well as I continue to like Cam Ward more. I'm subscribing to the idea that they can be top 10 caliber picks in this draft. I don't think I'll get to the point where I'm saying that one of these guys deserves to be in the top 5 consideration with the other talent around them, but good players, both of them, Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. I just happen to continue to believe that Shedeur Sanders would be a better fit for the Tennessee Titans. As Easton says, Cam Ward, he's fine, but if they're convicted on small arm Will Levis, everybody should be fired. He is apparently small armed Will Levis.
You're just going to see my fist go through the camera.
Burner, yeah. Love it here. We can move on to another one here who has already been released by their team, Aaron Rodgers.
Here we go.
Who a lot of the national media has pointed to the Titans as a possible landing spot. Everybody loves to bring up the idea that Aaron Rodgers could find a home here and continue playing in the NFL in Tennessee because he owns property here. He has a house here, I believe. That is the stopping point of the reasons why Aaron Rodgers makes sense for the Titans, according to a lot of the national media folks. This is like, you know, when you accidentally, when you get desperate on a dating app and you kind of take off all your parameters and your filters and you see what's really out there. He's the first guy that shows up and you immediately delete the app because you know that it's just not going to work out. Aaron Rodgers is my delete the app and just roll with what you have. Roll with your own confidence in yourself kind of swipe here. He's not a guy I want the Titans to even consider. Now, would they? I don't know. I think it goes against a lot of what the Titans are building. I know some people have brought up the connection that bring Aaron Rodgers in because he has a relationship with Chad Brinker when they continue to draft successors. So you're telling me your pitch to Aaron Rodgers to come here is, hey, you know the thing that you quietly hated your entire career, where they continued to draft your successors and
Yeah.
talk about the guy after you? Let's go do. Why don't you sign with us so you can continue playing, and we're going to do the same exact thing with you, right? That makes no sense in my mind, and I don't know. I don't see it as a fit. Specifically, you saw what he did last year with the New York Jets in their offensive line, which also was subpar to below average. Um, you know, you look at what they have right now in Tennessee. I find it hard to believe that you can have much more success this upcoming season than you did last year with Will Levis, with a 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers at the helm.
Yeah, I mean, there's an ego to placate. We know about the drama and him like not wanting to play with the young receivers in Green Bay and like forcing the Jets to go sign Randall Cobb and Alan Lazard and all those guys. It just doesn't really seem like a fit with what this new Titans regime is trying to build. And I would also qualify that with an emphasis on where they're at in this rebuild. Like, this thing is in its infancy. Like, you're at a point where you kind of need to get leaders in place that can grow into the role, right? Like, you need your homegrown drafted guys to step up and become leaders. You probably don't want 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers with his personality coming in and just staking his claim as the leader of the locker room and like snuffing out anybody else that even remotely approaches it. I think it would be a pretty ill-conceived idea to go after Aaron Rodgers. I think the only scenario in which it happens is if they feel like they're forced to go with Aaron Rodgers. Like, there's literally nobody else. You're facing the prospects of going with Will Levis for another season or going with Will Levis and adding Aaron Rodgers to compete with him. Like, that's the rock bottom scenario. On the field, from what I've watched of Aaron Rodgers, I don't think he was half as bad last season as everybody just automatically thinks he was. I think he actually had an okay season, better than what the Titans had at quarterback, but I'm just not sure that the risk is worth it.
Yeah, I would agree with you there, which takes us to our next veteran quarterback on this list, and one that is probably the least likely given what we've heard this week. However, never out of the question. But Derek Carr, to me, is he is the one. He is the love at first sight out of this group to me. And I think people are really gonna not like that I said that, but to me, if you can go and get a Derek Carr, and now Mike Garafolo talked about this earlier this week, where Kellen Moore said Derek's a tremendous quarterback in this league. He's a starter in this league. He's a premier player in this league. Really excited to team up with him and go through this process. It doesn't necessarily commit himself to a Derek Carr, but it sure sounds like the Saints would look to go into next season with Kellen Moore and Derek Carr. However, if they were to change their minds and Derek Carr was available either by trade or he's cut and he's free to sign wherever he wants, it makes the most sense given what the Titans have. We've talked about the connections between him and Callahan before. They've worked together. They play in similar styles between him and Callahan. You talk about a guy who last year had a sneaky good season. Derek Carr, when he played, was productive, was good in terms of, you look at pressure to sack rate, you look at turnover worthy play rate. When you look at those two, he's around guys like Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, even like a Bryce Young who had a good season in terms of those stats. He's a guy that I think you could easily bring in to this system if he was available via cut, and still go get your quarterback like a Cam Ward or Shadur Sanders to work underneath him. That, to me, is one of the best scenarios. Now, I know people in our comments here, like D Good said, what would you say if the Saints wanted to trade up from 9? What is the price? I have no idea what that price would be. It certainly would be a haul, right? If you wanted to come up and get your quarterback, give me Derek Carr and your first and like your next year's first and your next year's second, like I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with taking a Derek Carr your next year capital because once again, the Saints were pretty bad this year. I can't imagine the Shadur Sanders or Cam Ward experiment down there would instantly turn that organization around with their cap troubles. Give me that, and I'm sitting pretty, in my opinion.
Yeah, why not? I mean, I think Derek Carr, again, I come back to this, a lot better than what they had at quarterback last year. I think he elevates the team. I think if you can get him and still acquire more draft capital, it's like the exact opposite of what we were talking about with Matthew Stafford. That's what you want. That's the position you want to be in. I still think Derek Carr has some good football left in him. I think he would be a good fit in the system. He has experience with Brian Callahan. I'm kind of with you. Like, the cost would not involve draft capital unless they were to retain him, like you're talking about, in which case, like, you better give us a haul if we're going to make this move. So I don't know. I think he checks a lot of the boxes as to what this regime will be looking for in a quarterback and a veteran presence, and he still affords you a little bit of time to come up with a contingency plan on developing a guy for the future.
Yeah, to me, a guy like Derek Carr is the ideal bridge quarterback in this scenario. One
Yeah,
guy
sure.
who is probably not going to is going to give you the quarterback as well as give you a haul in this scenario because of the cap situation in New Orleans, because of the fact that they're past due to blow it all up. Um, he's a guy that I think gives you the most versatility with your draft capital, even after acquiring him with all of these others. Like, there is still a lot of options when looking at that. As D Good said, is it bad that he wants the Titans and Saints to figure out a trade that includes Carr and the Titans get a haul? No, I think it's past due time, considering the Saints are what, $40-ish million over the cap right now. Like, they
I think
have a
it's
lot
close
of
to
things
50.
they have a lot of things to work out here. And so if you
Yeah.
can do that, move back to 9, look at a guy like Tet McMillan, look at a guy like Mikael Williams, one of those,
Whoa.
Mike Green. Like, you are still getting a lot of options there that makes your team better for the future and still gives you a chance to win 7, 8, 9 games this season with where they are. To me, it's the perfect fit. Now, it's the least likely fit, in my opinion, but it's the perfect one for the Titans to not only continue rebuilding and resetting, but also get them a jump start on where they want to be in 2026 and beyond.
I'm with you on all that except for Tet McMillan. I mean, I could be talked into Michael Williams. I prefer Jalen Walker. I'm a big Jalen
I
Walker
I
guy.
I was saying I was giving more examples of like the type of talent that'll be around there, right? Like,
Okay,
you
gotcha.
still can
Yeah.
you're still going to be in the top 10 right there. You're still going to find a guy in one of those wide receiver in a need, I guess you could say, that is going to fill a hole from the beginning. But yeah,
You could probably still get the best tackle in the draft class at that spot too.
sure, yeah, you could definitely look at that as an option. Basically, you're trading back, filling the quarterback hole, and then filling another need instantly, while also getting as much capital as you possibly can. And
Sounds
so
great.
I'm really good with that there. We can move on to some of these other guys who, I have some more opinionated and poignant thoughts on them. But before we do that, have to give a huge shout out to our sponsor, ML Rose Craft Beer and Burgers. 7 wonderful locations, including Capitol View, Franklin, Gallatin, Melrose 8th Avenue, Mount Juliet, Sylvan Park, and coming soon, another location to East Nashville near Inglewood. So easy to see why I myself and Stoney love ML Rose, because with over 25 beers available and on tap to you, along with their extensive menu, how could you not love everything ML Rose has to offer? Earlier this month, I tried their burger of the month, the El Jefe burger with the jalapeno jam, cream cheese, bacon. Was absolutely phenomenal. Have to get back out there. And if you are listening to this show on Valentine's Day and realized it's Valentine's Day and need a quick fix, might as well go over to ML Rose and get you some good food and drinks on a Friday night like this, and you're set up, right, Stoney?
Oh yeah, I was just out at ML Rose on Saturday night. By the way, out on Charlotte Pike. I went out. I'm still trying to get that burger of the month. They were out of it whenever I went, but my waitress was so helpful. She was like, "Okay, so here's what we can do that's similar. Like get you the Sergeant Pepper and get the blue cheese off of it." And I'm like, "That's great because I'm not a big blue cheese guy."
Hmm.
So I got a similar burger and it was so good, man. They just always deliver. My wife got a salad, got the oh gosh, I think it was the Thai peanut chicken salad. Had a little kick to it, fantastic. I ate like my entire burger, an entire order of waffle fries, and half of my wife's salad. Drank a couple of IPAs, and I thought they were going to have to cart me out of there.
I was gonna say, how did you not fall asleep right there at the table? But
Man, I was
it's
dying. I was
when you
fighting for
have
my
good
life.
food at ML Rose, it just can't be beat. Thank
You
you.
can't stop eating. You can't
Yes.
stop eating. If there's food around me, I'm like a human garbage disposal. I'm just sucking it all up.
I love it. Thank you to ML Rose for sponsoring the show, as always. Stoney, we can continue and talk about another interesting, probably the top quarterback on the free agent market, Sam Darnold. Of course,
Yes.
it's still not set in stone that he reaches the market. I'm interested to keep tabs on what they do. What we hear at the combine coming up about their situation between JJ McCarthy and Sam Darnold. But to me, if we go along the line of thinking that I am, that this team is not a quarterback away, signing Sam Darnold to me is not, in my opinion, one of the better ideas for this team. And I know that might be a hot take, but considering what the situation Sam Darnold went into, right? Having a okay to average offensive line, having elite weapons at his disposal, and a defense that is veteran backed and has a really tenured and veteran defensive coordinator at the helm. Obviously, you also bring in what Kevin O'Connell does, obviously coach of the year, but what he can do with the quarterback in his scheme. You look at what Sam Darnold would do in translating to what the Titans have right now. I don't know if you're going to find the same success in what you're paying for that the Vikings did this past season. Now, if they signed him, the way you could talk me into Sam Darnold is laying out the path of we're going to sign him to a 3-year deal. We're going to still get our quarterback this year, and we're going to bridge that in a situation where we are guaranteeing this staff and this front office the ability and the patience to work on it, to make this into a contending team and give them the benefit of the doubt here, right? I think if you sign Sam Darnold, it's going to be more than a 2-year deal in what he's asking for, and it's a hard pill to swallow for me personally.
Yeah, so I think Darnold is like the one potentially available option that checks both the bridge quarterback and the potential long-term quarterback boxes. Like he's going to come in right away and be an upgrade over Will Levis and Mason Rudolph, but I think he's also still young enough that he could potentially be your answer for the next 5 years or so. But he's also not going to be a cheap option after what we saw in Minnesota this past season. I I tend to think, man, you look back at that 2018 draft class and Baker Mayfield's coming along nicely. Sam Darnold's come along nicely. Like it's a reminder that some guys still in the modern era of football take time to develop and grow into their roles. Right? What we remember about Sam Darnold early on is like seeing ghosts, Sam Darnold, where it became a meme. And something that Will Levis is all too familiar with, becoming a meme. But he settled down pretty nicely. And I don't think that he's just a byproduct of supreme talent around him and good coaching. I think part of that offense still has to flow through the quarterback. Like it's discounting a lot of what Darnold did to just say anybody could do what he did in that offense. We're about to find out in all likelihood with JJ McCarthy stepping in,
Yeah.
whether or not he can do it. But I still think Darnold is a good option for this team if they can make the numbers work, but it's going to be a huge financial commitment. And again, I hark back to where this team is at in its rebuild. And, I just don't know if they're ready to be spending that kind of money on a free agent.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at it. Once again, I'd push back, and I agree with Kenneth here, where he says Sam Darnold is fool's gold. Like, Darnold to me is the catfish in this situation, right? He is catfishing you based on the generational wide receiver talent and tight end talent he had around him that you simply will not have. And I think a lot of that, like, as much as Sam Darnold could elevate this Titans team, the pieces around him still are like in Minnesota. A lot of the work that that Sam Darnold was doing could also be a byproduct of Justin Jefferson being in that offense last season. I think for the most part, you don't have a Justin Jefferson or anything close to that in Calvin Ridley and the rest of the supporting cast around a Sam Darnold if he was here. As Jason says in the comments, I'd be fine with a Darnold on a 1-year deal. I would too. One season, I think with Sam Darnold as a bridge guy could potentially work, could get you to that 7, 8, 9 win range with this team right now. But I still need to see more proof of concept from Sam Darnold personally for me to think that he could be a long-term option. Now, if you see him signed to a 3-year deal by the Titans, maybe that's more of an inclination that this regime does believe that he can be a long-term option. And then that's where we could start to see that experiment happen. But for me right now, Sam Darnold has not shown enough, in my opinion, to be the guy that can be a long-term solution. And it certainly would cost around, like you were saying, a Baker Mayfield level of money, 30-ish million, maybe 35. Like, could it be even plausible that he's shooting for 40 million a year? Like, it's a hard pill for me to swallow.
So if he's just a system quarterback and he's just the byproduct of the talent around him, why didn't it work for him in San Francisco? Why could he not push Brock Purdy for that job?
Because I think Kyle Shanahan is just enamored with Brock Purdy. I think Brock Purdy perfectly fits what Shanahan wanted in that system. So there was no reason to move on. Now, I will give you that it took a lot of being in that Shanahan system for him to probably figure some things out, and is why I think he can be a starting level quarterback at the NFL level now. I don't know if you're going to get that same evolutionary play that you saw from Sam Darnold this season if you're taking away so much of that talent from moving to Tennessee.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, like, I think he grew into being a quarterback. I think he's on a positive trajectory there that, who's to say that Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson didn't benefit from having Sam Darnold at quarterback?
Fair. I think you could say that.
I'm just saying, and I don't think that I don't think that offensive line was very good either.
It certainly was better than what the Titans had. Like, if you give Sam Darnold behind this Titans line from this past season, I don't know if you're having the same success that he had in Minnesota.
I think people get too caught up in what the Titans offensive line looked like in September and October and not enough appreciate what it looked like in December. I'll just say that. I think the unit got better, and I think Minnesota's offensive line's a little overrated. That's just my 2 cents.
Fair enough. We can move on then to one here that, once again, another one that I just can't get behind, which is Justin Fields. This one to me is pretty easy. Justin Fields will never and was never going to be, he won't be a scheme fit for what the Titans are doing.
He doesn't.
Nowhere in Brian Callahan's history has he worked with a quarterback like Justin Fields. It doesn't seem like Brian Callahan wants to change the way he operates his offense, and Justin Fields simply does not fit the mold of what they want to do. He's not a guy who's going to sit in structure and facilitate an offense. And could he learn to do that? Maybe, but I just don't see it certainly right now in his career. Now, is that a place where the Titans could bring him in and he could start to learn that? Maybe, but I just don't see from the get-go this working out.
Yeah, I mean, he strikes me as the type of quarterback that Brian Callahan would not be very interested in, but I'm curious as to why he wouldn't be at least a little intrigued to try and get his hands on Justin Fields and kind of tinker with the offense to come up with something, because I think Fields is another guy that I don't know that he ever got a fair shake in Chicago, and I'm
Maybe.
not saying
Yeah.
that he didn't. I'm saying literally I don't know, because I didn't watch enough Chicago Bears tape to have an opinion on it. But to see the improvement in Pittsburgh kind of makes me think that there is still an upward trajectory with Justin Fields, and I just don't know why you wouldn't be interested in that when you had the quarterback situation that you had last year. Like, if it came down to Justin Fields, I think you could end up a lot worse. I liked what Arthur Smith did with him, but it is kind of also intriguing to think about the fact that the Steelers are probably going to go in a different direction. It wasn't enough for them to just fully with their chest say, yeah, Justin Fields is the guy that we want. We're going to work to bring him back. So I don't know. I don't think he's a scheme fit either, but I'm at least open to the idea of working with the talent.
Listen, yeah, if you were to, let's say, punt on the idea of a quarterback and just
Yeah.
bring someone in for the sake of competition with Will Levis, if you were going to do Will Levis part 2 Electric Boogaloo, right? I'd be okay with Justin Fields being the flyer
Yeah.
guy you take a chance on, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think you can bring him in and immediately say he's going to be the answer, because it's
Sure.
such a dramatic shift. You look at what he had success, right, with the Pittsburgh Steelers and that Arthur Smith, but when you look at what guys like George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth did in that offense last year, they didn't have the production until um, Russell Wilson stepped in, right? You did not see George Pickens start to have the year he had until a guy like Russell Wilson, someone who's not going to move around in the pocket and get outside of structure. You didn't see that until Russell Wilson was there. And so I think it would be a tough sell for a guy like Callahan. As Kenneth says, this is where I'm taking the opposing view. I think Fields is the case study that the Bears were a mess and Tomlin promised Russ the job. I mean, maybe, but
Maybe.
I
Yeah.
don't think promises should get in the way of the better quarterback, right?
Yeah.
Like I
That's
think
bad coaching.
you still saw the Steelers use Fields in certain packages.
Hmm.
Obviously, he was still in the system, but if he was truly better and more kind of productive in that scheme in Pittsburgh, I think they would have stuck with him. And so the only way you could get me to subscribe to Justin Fields is like you said, like I said, if you were to go with Will Levis again for a year and you needed to bring in competition like you said you would, I'd be okay taking a flyer on him.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm intrigued by Justin Fields. I think he got better this year. I think he can still get even better. I'd be willing to take a shot on him.
Yeah, I love it. Last big guy we're going to talk about before we get to some speed dating options here. Kirk Cousins. Your thoughts on what he could potentially do in Tennessee?
Oh man. I don't know. I think if you've got to subscribe to theories about players like, oh well, you've got him another year removed from the injury. Uh-oh, there might be something there. I think that's like you're talking yourself into a player. It did not end well in Atlanta, and it ultimately led to his benching and the starting of Michael Penix Jr. That era is off and underway for the Falcons. I I am concerned by the tape because it does not look like the Kirk Cousins that Atlanta thought they were getting. It does not look like Minnesota Vikings Kirk Cousins. I it would be kind of a last resort situation for me to want to go down that path.
I think he's the opposite end of we're running it back with Will Levis, but we want some
Yeah.
competition. I
Yeah.
think that's the opposite end. And if we're going with that scenario, I'd be fine with it, right? Like you're bringing him in for cheap because Atlanta's still having to dole out a decent amount of cash to him. It's a little bit of the Russell Wilson situation like how that ended in Denver. I think you bring him in and you have him compete with Will Levis. You know, if Will Levis ends up still being better than him, then you know what you need to know about Kirk Cousins, and it probably didn't cost you more than $4 million, but goes against the cap. And you know, I don't think you know, having Kirk Cousins in there as a voice for Will Levis would be the worst thing in the world. I certainly
Sure.
think it might be an upgrade over Mason Rudolph and Trevor Siemian, but still, like, that's probably the opposite side of the spectrum of we're running it back with Will Levis. We're going to suck and go get our quarterback in
Yeah.
2026, but having him around may not be the worst option in the world. D Good says that's what happens when you sign a dude that blew out his Achilles midseason last year, kind of saying, I feel bad saying this. I think Cousins is cooked.
I'm with you, Kenneth.
Yeah. Logan has an interesting question that I think we can talk about at the end of the episode here. But before we get to that, let's do some speed dating here with the last couple guys that I think could be options in one of these random
Okay.
multiverses out there. In one universe, this probably happens. First of all, Russell Wilson. Smash or pass? You're passing? I am too. I think he falls very much into the same category a Kirk Cousins does. I think Russ has cooked all he can in his career.
Yes.
There's nothing left to cook. The pantry is empty. Gardner Minshew.
Oh, pass, but it would be a fun smash.
It'd be fun. It'd be intriguing. It's like a one night stand. I think you.
Yeah.
Like a one night stand, you know, might as well do the Raiders thing that they did. It certainly did not work out well for their coaching staff. But
Like,
it could be fun.
I'm gonna be walking funny the next day, but we had a good time.
I love it. How about the Misfit Toys? And by Misfit Toys, I mean the young guys who may soon be the next Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold's in a Zach Wilson, a Mac Jones. I think I saw Eddie in the comments here who he said, are you open to hashtag Team Toxic? Which I think from a previous episode was the idea you have Will Levis, Zach Wilson, and Aaron Rodgers in a room together.
Let's go.
Personally, hey, if you're bringing in competition, might as well bring in one of these guys.
That's what I'm saying.
I don't care. You know, might as well.
That's what I'm saying. I'm right there with you, man. Like, these guys, I know stock is way down on both of them right now, but Zach Wilson and Mac Jones both still offer some upside. And if you can get quarterbacks in for cheap that still have some upside, put them all in a room together, hand them all a knife, and say the last man standing comes out victorious.
Hey, all right. Can I be in the room for that? That sounds exciting for sure.
Yeah.
Next one here, Jameis Winston.
Pass.
I'm swiping right.
I'm
swiping right, and I'm not thinking about it
because I just don't think Jameis Winston solves the big turnover problem. I think Jameis Winston probably keeps the turnover chain going.
But he's prayed. He's prayed on it. The Lord will deliver him from his pick sixes.
Well, so, fair enough. Who am I to doubt him then?
You know, if they do that, it's more competition for Will Levis, but it's basically the same player. And, you know, that you're just doing what the last one here is, and that is officially the Levis round 2 electric boogaloo. In terms of, you know, did the means fit the result, or whatever the
ends justify the means?
Did the ends justify the means, which is one more year of Will Levis?
Oh, brother.
I don't know.
Yeah, my response to that question was how many beers?
That's fair. Let's say 8.
Yeah, I maybe over for that. That is the last resort, and that is, like, to me, if that is where they end up, it signals we know that our roster sucks right now, and it's going to suck for a little bit. So we're just going to play the long game and get the best player available and try to address quarterback on down the line instead of forcing it.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. As D-Good says, he either figures it out or they pick top 5 again and get a new coach to pick his quarterback.
I mean, that kind of feels like where
that
we're
feels
headed.
like, yeah, it's where we're headed inevitably. So maybe that happens, maybe not.
Yeah.
But it all starts with the draft. And the last question we'll end on here is Logan asking, same exact tape, but Wards and Sanders switch names. How is the narrative different?
Oh man, I don't I don't know because man,
Does it vault Cam Ward into the de facto number one?
yeah, probably.
Which
I
sucks, but
I would
does it make the new Cam Ward, Shadur Ward, Cam Sanders, does it make him not a first round pick anymore? No.
no.
It doesn't take him out of the first round because the tape is the tape and a name
Yeah.
is not gonna define that to me personally.
I mean, that's the thing, like it feels like the Sanders hate is mostly among fans. Like the draft analysts, the personnel people in the NFL, they seem to like both of these guys. So for me, like the hype is on the fan side of the equation. And I
Yes.
don't know like how much that really matters when it comes to decision making in the NFL. All due respect to us fans. I don't really know how much our voice is heard in the war rooms when they're drafting players. So I think there's a disconnect. Like,
If you look at the movie Draft Day, though, it tells you that it
well,
means a
touche.
whole heck of a lot.
Yeah, touche. The documentary Draft Day. It does.
Yes.
No, I think like maybe the perception of these two players is different among fans, but I kind of feel like even if they swap tape, NFL evaluators would still be saying the same things about each guy
Yeah.
in their
I
new bodies.
I I agree with you there. Um, as Jason says, Levis is a terrible idea, and I'd rather see him than most of that list that we just listed,
Man,
which means there really is no real answer.
well, we
And
didn't even get into Drew Lock, Jarrett Stidham, Daniel Jones is still out there. I mean, come on.
I hey, if those happen, then we can do a whole nother show talking about them. But
Oh, I can't wait. I
I
can't
think
wait to
that's
dig
gonna
into the Drew Lock tape.
Oh my gosh. And you know what? Maybe if you don't want to listen to us go into the Drew Lock tape, you might as well go on over to our wonderful and amazing sponsor, ML Rose, to get you a beer and a burger, or head on over to Sinker's Beverages for simply the best selection of beer, wine, and spirits in the Nashville area. But I think that's going to do it for our show today. A lot of good talk about the quarterback options since there are a ton of them. Not all of them are great, but it'll be interesting to see the picture become clear as we get closer to the combine. Thank you, Stoney, once again for being here. And until next Tuesday, where we get into more of what the Titans may do at the 101, this has been the Hot Read Podcast. We will talk to you then.